Call me Mr. Positive here, but I actually really like the Canon R5 Mark II. Canon has done a really nice job with this upgrade. It's not perfect. We'll talk about those imperfections in just a bit, but for the most part, once you get this camera into the real world and you start taking photos, this baby shines. All right, before we kick things off, I am not paid or sponsored for this video in any way, shape, or form. Canon Singapore was very kind enough to loan me the camera for review, plus a few lenses, the 15-35 f2.8 RF mount, of course, which I'm recording on right now, the 200-800, which I did a review on a few months back, and the 85 1.2 RF mount. Then I also rented the 28-70 f2 because I wanted to try that lens with this camera system, because that is one of my favorite zoom lenses out of any system, hands down, even though it's massively big. I absolutely love that lens. With that said, these are my thoughts and my thoughts only. Now, the R5 Mark II's got a little bit of a, when it was first announced, it had a little bit of a rough start, wouldn't you say? I mean, Canon didn't really have the cameras ready for prime time. They were on pre-production firmware. The reviewers, even like myself, we had very limited time, maybe a couple hours at most. From what I saw in the US, it was even worse than what we had here in Singapore. I think the Singapore team did a pretty decent job considering. But I can understand why there was a lot of criticisms, and hopefully Canon does address that in future camera releases. With that said though, once you get a production unit in your hands and you actually start using the R5 Mark II, you realize this is a pretty significant upgrade, not just in the camera itself, but into the whole photography space as a whole. Because right now we've hit a limit in terms of almost how fast sensors can read now, the megapixel races. Yes, we're getting to the global shutter era, but for the most part, these cameras that we're using today are pretty much, I don't see full frame going much further than that. They can go faster, but obviously there will be compromises. So really what it comes down to is feature sets. What features are going to help you get the best photographs possible, get the best keepers possible, take all the technology that's inside these cameras, kind of push it to the side and let you just concentrate on your subject and your environment and just capture images. And I think Canon's did a pretty good job with that for the most part. Yes, we can talk about some of the instances where it's very hard to find certain settings, and we'll talk about that later on in the video. But for the most part, they put a lot of new technology into this. It's very hard to verbalize it without sounding like we're reading off a spec sheet, which is not something I want to do for this video. So what I'm going to do now is, before I get into more of the camera system, because you guys are here for the image quality, and obviously you're seeing all the charts out there about dynamic range, I'm going to show you real-world results in Lightroom, taking photographs of people, animals, variety of lighting situations, and also show you a little bit of video as well. By the way, I'm recording this entire A-roll in 8K 25p C-Log2, mind you, with the battery grip attached to the R5 Mark II, just to give you an idea of what you're seeing right here. So with that, let's jump into Lightroom, and then we'll come back. We'll talk more about the R5 Mark II. Now we're in the Lightroom. Let's take a look at some images from lifestyle to street to animal photography with a variety of different lenses, the 28-70 f2, the 200-800, and the 85 1.2. Okay, first and foremost, let's look at some lifestyle photography here. And this is with a couple models that were showcasing some headwear that they were making, kind of like they were just doing this for fun. But anyway, I wanted to show you these images. First and foremost, this has been edited, but let me show you the before edit to give you an idea of what it looks like straight out of camera. Straight out of camera is this. Again, some imperfections in the face, which we can easily cover up, but it was an overcast that day. We can just bring up the warmth a little bit just to sort of warm up the skin tone. But again, the colors out of Canon's sensor are fantastic, very easy to work with, especially on lifestyle people. I mean, they're some of the best out there. And the resolution of these files is awesome. Now we're at ISO 100. So you're going to get the max in terms of the resolution out of this. And I'm very, very happy with this. This was after edit here to give you an idea of what I did, just cleaned it up a bit, brightened her up, and done a little bit of edits. But again, very happy with the overall image. In terms of the image quality, this camera, like the R5, is fantastic. Here's another image as well of this model here. And again, I mean, really happy with this. And I've done some skin retouching here. You're going to see that here in this image. Let's go back in. Again, it's a little bit cooler here. It was overcast that day. Just bring up the warmth there on the temperature. I mean, look at the detail. ISO 100. Bang on. And again, with a little bit of a retouch for me through Photoshop and just a little bit of, getting rid of some of the hairs on the face. Very, very happy with the image. The image quality, the fall off, the colors, bang on once again. And let's talk about dynamic range here for a second. So we're now at the zoom, as I normally go. This is with a 200 to 800. So this lens will produce more noise because of the, the slower aperture on this. Case in point, I'm at f8, 432 millimeters, 1/400th of a second, ISO 800. So this is still relatively clean for the most part. And as you're going to see through this image, it looks great. I mean, there's a lot of detail here. Let's go into seeing the highlights and shadows, which I've been playing around with a bit here. So if I want to just reset this all, this is straight out of camera. If I want to bring up the shadows more, I've got a lot of information there. If I want to bring down the highlights, I've got some good amount of information to still pull from there. So very, very happy with this overall. Now, one thing to notice about with any camera system, if you're using Lightroom, is that you are going to have some formula of noise reduction brought in as you import the images. Case in point here, luminance is at 25, color is at 23. If I bring all that down, you will see, obviously, at 800, there's going to be some grain, some color noise coming in here. You're going to notice this more on a display than you would if you were to print this out. But again, if you want to correct this, very easy. Lightroom has their preferential numbers that they import the images at. So there's about 25, and very happy with the overall image. So again, in terms of dynamic range, how would I compare it to other cameras out there? I probably would say that the Sony a7R5 has better dynamic range overall. But again, you are sacrificing, the shutter speeds are not as high, even on electronic shutter mode. And of course, you're not going to get the highest frames per second. So there are going to be some differences. But for the most part, I mean, the Sony would be number one. I think the Canon and let's say the Nikon Z8 are right up there neck and neck. Here's another image here of this animal. And again, let's look at the numbers here. ISO 3200, we're at f8, focal length 500 millimeters here. Again, looks pretty clean to me. We have some noise reduction happening here, very similar to what we had before. Luminance at 20, color at 50. But this is very usable, guys. Very, very usable. This is sharp. Again, I could sharpen this up in Topaz denoise, reduce the noise even further in Lightroom if I wanted to do that. But the fact that I'm getting really good ISO performance at 3200 here, I'm very happy with this. No issues at all with that. Now let's push it even further. This is ISO 12,800. Now I actually did a Lightroom denoise on this. So this is going to be what it's like without Lightroom denoise. And let's go back here. Let's bring all this down here a second. Let's bring the luminance. Let's bring the color noise here. This is without any sort of noise reduction on this. And as you can see, at 12,800, there's a lot of noise here. But again, you can clean this up relatively fast, as I showed you before with that. That cleans it up beautifully. And if you want to give even more so, use Lightroom noise reduction, and it brings it down and you have all the details there. So software will help you out for the most part. Now, one thing, of course, obviously the lighting for this situation wasn't the greatest. It's sort of an overcast that day at the zoo. And these African, I think, painted dogs aren't the most photogenic animals out there to photograph, but they do a decent job. Here's another shot of them playing around again. Looking at the numbers here, 6400 at focal length 800 millimeters. And this is a pretty clean image. Again, we've done some little bit of noise reduction on that, bring down the luminance and the color, and we're pretty much there. In terms of dynamic range with higher ISO performance, I mean, it's pretty good. I mean, you're going to get some blowouts here. I mean, this was pretty much overexposed right there. You see that. But you have a lot of information in the highlights that you can still bring back down, and then even the shadows as well. So again, there's still decent dynamic range within these files that I'm more than happy with, especially after, playing around with them. So sometimes charts are one thing, real world is something different. Then I got this photo of this tiger walking through. I just absolutely love this shot. I mean, there has been some noise reduction done on this one as well, but I just love this shot right through the bushes here. Fantastic. Okay, let's look at some images here with the 85 1.2. Now, again, at 1.2, you're going to get some really good image quality out of this camera system overall. And it just shows, look at this, the skin detail, the hair, everything is bang on. And you can just bring down those highlights in the background. It does a great job. There's so much information here within these files. Again, the reason I'm pointing this out is that when we look at charts, it's going to say one thing. Real world is going to be something different. By the way, here's this other lion shot I got here. Look how close I was. This 200 to 800, by the way, phenomenal lens. Yes, if it's going to be overcast or darker, being that it's a slower aperture will come into play. But I mean, once you get the shot, man, absolutely awesome on this. I love this. And this has been edited a bit, but still, I'll show you the before edit here. This is straight out of camera. This is after my first series of edits, a little bit of noise reduction, and there we go. I mean, not bad for a $1,500 lens, guys. Not bad at all. But again, the colors, the detail, the dynamic range, it's all there. Now, speaking of this, I want to talk about buffering for a second here, because something I did notice, and I had two cameras for this review. The first one, which was sent to me, it had some buffering issues. It was a bit slow on the buffering. And I did mention this in my Instagram threads, sort of first impressions. And then I talked to Canon, they replaced the camera. I didn't have as much buffering issues, but I will say that the images tend to buffer a bit more on the R5 Mark II than you would see on a Nikon Z8 or maybe on a Z9 for that matter. So I don't know if this is something they will address in a firmware update. It's not bad. I mean, when I was at the zoo, I didn't have any issues where I was, the camera stopped while I was waiting for it to clear the buffer. There's nothing like that, but it's something that you do notice that does take a little bit longer time to buffer, and that's with a high-speed CF Express Type B card. So just keep that in mind overall. Okay, just look at some of these lifestyle images here with the 85 1.2. I mean, I made this in black and white. This was in color. I mean, this lens, bright daylight, you're going to be fine with this. Speaking of which, if you're going to use a 1.2 bright daylight, you're going to have to use the electronic shutter. The only way to use the electronic shutter on this is manual or shutter priority. If you're an aperture priority, it will max out at 8,000. But on the other two settings, you can go way above 8,000. So that's a little bit odd. Hopefully Canon does address that in a firmware update, because I feel like if you have the electronic shutter that can go all the way up to like 32,000 thereabouts, I'm paraphrasing here, but we'll put the number right below here on the screen, what it maxes out at. It should do that on every setting, not just on a couple settings, because, when you're going in a variety of different lighting conditions and you want to stay at 1.2, you don't want to keep fiddling with the camera. So hopefully Canon does address that. But overall, guys, very happy with the image quality once again. I mean, all the shots that I've been taking here over the last week and a half plus, I've just been really thrilled with. Street photography to, animal photography like this. I mean, I'm absolutely thrilled by the performance of this. So as I mentioned before, and I've said it again, charts are one thing, real world is something different. So with that, let's talk a little bit more about the body design on this. Now, I did mention this in my first impressions. I like the body design more than the R5. I think it has a little bit more, I'm going to say girth, just for the sake of it. It has more girth. It feels more substantial in the hand. The buttons feel more tactile. The switches feel more tactile. It's a lot easier to go from photo to video mode. Kind of reminds you of the cinema line from some aspects of the camera system. It's a really good, well thought out camera while still maintaining the ethos of the R5, which was a very popular camera and still is to this day for a lot of photographers out there. Canon has done a good job blending the two. And they made this much more of a hybrid camera than even the R5 was 4 years ago. So much so that, as I mentioned, you're seeing a lot of that cinema line coming into play. C-Log 2, various different camera settings, the way that you control the camera through video and photo mode. It's all sort of built into this in a very nice and unique way. I'm not used to using Canon cinema cameras, so my entry into this is a little bit newer than maybe some of you out there, but I did find it to be somewhat intuitive, but somewhat also a little bit convoluted. We'll get into that in just a second though. But in terms of the overall body design, it feels really good. Now, the display on the back of it is nice, it's sharp, it's vibrant. Do I wish it was a fully articulating display, which I mean, tilt up and down and flip out and rotate? Yes. It's not that, unfortunately. It's just a flip-out rotatable display we've been seeing on their cameras for a period of time, which I feel is a little bit of a disservice to the R5 Mark II, but it's not a deal breaker. It's just something that we wish we had. The EVF, same resolution as the R5, but still very, very good. It's got a high refresh rate to it. It's very smooth images. No problem at all. I would say, though, with the EVF is that you may, if you're into outdoor photography, that you may want to invest in a different eye cup, something that's a little bit more deeper or wider, because one thing I did notice when I was outside in the zoo taking photos of animals, that I was getting some glare coming in as I was looking through the EVF. For some reason, that rubber cup is just a little bit too small or narrow. So I did get some glare coming in, but that's something that you can rectify relatively easy. It's not a deal breaker. The cover that's on top of the hot shoe now, everybody was talking about the pre-production, how hard it was to take off. It's a lot easier to take off on the production version. But it's a cool little thing. Again, it's nice to have, but you could just slide in a third-party hot shoe cover and just go with that. So neither here nor there. But overall, I really like the feel of the camera system. Now, with the vertical grips, there's a series of vertical grips that you can get with this. I think if you're going to be more into video and you're going to be shooting a lot of photos, you may want to get the fan grip, which I'm actually using right now. And you can set the fan speeds to various different, modes inside of it. There are no vertical controls on this, so it's unlike other vertical or grips where you can actually, turn the camera over and shoot accordingly. You can't do that, so keep that in mind. You can slot 2 batteries inside this, and of course, there's that piece that goes inside the camera system, so you can't have a 3rd battery inside the camera. So just 2 batteries is where you're at with that. Speaking of batteries, though, you probably already have heard this or not. If you're going to use your old R5 batteries with this, it will limit some of the functionality in this camera system. You still can record video and photo, but you will have a lot of those extra settings that you may want to have somewhat handicapped. So I would definitely say invest in the new batteries. Okay, so with that, let's talk about the menu system. And this is where
Canon's always been pretty good. They've been pretty good at the menu system, but at the same time,
there's a lot of new features in this thing, and sometimes it's hard to find features as well. Case in point, if you want to shoot in C-Log 2 or C-Log 3 or whatever that you want, any log profile, it's a little bit challenging to find it. Now, from what I understand, if you're used to the cinema line, you'll know where it's at. But if you're not used to the cinema line, you may find yourself hunting for it, which does not make any sense to me. I don't know why. I mean, some camera companies do this. I don't know why you just can't have it where you have your frame rates and let's say you want to shoot 8K, 4K, 1080p, choose your frame rate. And then right below that, just say, I want to shoot in C-Log 2 and C-Log 3 or just, standard or HLG. Just have everything right there. But it's not the case for this camera system. No, it's not. You have to go to another setting to set C-Log 2. And then you go back, it's to your frame rate setting. It's a little bit all over the place. Hopefully they can fix that in a future firmware update. Some questions that I did get from you guys though was, in terms of recording video, can you have waveforms and false colors and all that there while you're recording? And the answer is yes, you can. But if you want to use the leveler, that does switch off when you're recording, but comes right back on when you're not recording. Some people don't like that. Some people wish they had the option. I kind of understand why Canon took it out, because if you're recording, let's say a scene, you don't want your leveler in between your subject. You want to see your subject to make sure that it's in focus, that everything looks good. You don't want something in the middle of your image. So I understand why they took that out, but again, just to highlight based on some questions I had on my Instagram threads post, that's what you guys were asking. So yes, that information is there. So there's a lot more information if you want to record and use the EVF or the rear screen. So again, that kind of brings you back into that cinema line, as I mentioned earlier, with the R5 Mark II, which they're taking from the cinema line and bringing it into this camera system. And along the lines of what Jared Pullen said in his video, which I watched recently as well, I couldn't tell the difference if it lost a stop or two of dynamic range when you're taking photos outside. I want to make sure that my composition is correct, my exposure is correct, my settings are dialed in, because the Canon colors look fantastic out of camera anyway. I don't think you need to worry about dynamic range that much. And if you care that much about dynamic range, then just get medium format and call it a day. These images are awesome. Highly recommend it. Video, obviously pretty decent. C-Log 2, if you want to shoot in that, great. If you don't, it still looks really good out of camera system as well. All right, now we are doing an enhanced image stabilization test here with the 15-35 RF mount, f2.8, R5 Mark II, 8K 25p, C-Log 2. Just going to walk around so you get an idea if there's going to be some sort of wobbling as we would get on the R5 back in the day, because a lot of people complained about that, especially when they were doing video. But it seems to me, at least, looking at the test footage here, that the R5 Mark II does a better job than the R5 does. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Going to watch out for these those leaves right there. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. We just adjust the ND filter there, and looks like we're ready to go. All right, back to the review. So guys, to wrap up this video, because I don't want to spend too long going about this, because I will do subsequent videos in the future testing different lenses, testing different features, because there's so many things to talk about this camera. But just to tell you right off the bat, the Canon R5 Mark II is a big upgrade. Now let's talk autofocusing, because autofocusing has improved on the R5 Mark II, and there's even more autofocusing settings that come into play when you're doing sports, which here in Singapore, we don't have a lot of, so it's hard for me to sort of push the camera to its limits, where other reviewers may have better access to sporting events to do so. But I will say day to day, the autofocus is bang on. Is it better than the R5? It's slightly better for day-to-day usage. You will notice a difference. It's very quick, very easy to grab the eye. With animals, it's good. Sometimes it misses, sometimes it's there. You're gonna see through some of the recordings that I have here through the Atomos Ninja 5 that when the lion or the tiger's right there, it grabs it. And sometimes with zebras, it may find something else, but I find it to be pretty on par with what we're seeing out there through other camera systems. But for the most part, I was very happy with the performance in terms of autofocusing. It was really, really good. So to wrap up this video here, because there's just so much to talk about in this camera, it's hard to do in one video. It really is. And hopefully I get the camera back to do more videos for you guys. But the R5 Mark II has a lot of significant upgrades. And there's so many small features and nuances to it that really do help make photography better and your video work better. But it's something that you're going to have to really spend time with. But really what it comes down to, you want a camera that can capture really good image quality, autofocus you can trust, and video where you're not going to get all that warping that we saw previously with the R5. That's been addressed based on what I'm seeing here. I think you got a good camera system. And yes, I understand in the YouTube space and the review space, people like to watch drama. They like to click on drama. It gets them excited. It gets them talking. It gets them, passionate one way or the other. And while the initial launch of the R5 Mark II and the R1 probably weren't Canon's best, the products themselves, or at least I can speak for the R5 Mark II right now, is absolutely fantastic. And I'm not paid to say that. These are my thoughts only. And I really have enjoyed using this camera system, and hopefully I get it back to do more videos for you guys in the near future. Anyway, guys, those are my thoughts on the R5 Mark II. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. If you like this video, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. More content on the way. Any questions you guys have for the camera, ask me. I'll try to answer them for you. With that, take care. We'll chat soon.